Hey, Kyle.
Hey, Travis.
How you doing?
Oh, dude, I'm good.
All right. Well, I got Kyle Ripley here. This is our first Generalist Father Podcast episode with a real person on it besides myself. And Kyle Ripley is a friend of mine who lives in California. I'm going to have him talk about himself a little bit. But I do have to say at the beginning that he is one of my best friends, and he is partially to blame for inspiring this podcast with all the things we had in common and the way we vibed off of everything together. So I just wanted to highlight that, and then I'll let Kyle give you a little bit of the basics about himself, where he grew up, what kind of family he has at this point, his immediate family, and what he does for work to get us started.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Travis, for having me on. I know we've talked about doing something like this, and it's really fun to actually be recording.
Take action.
A long conversation that we get to have. So my name is Kyle Ripley. I'm from Ventura County, which is a little suburb of LA in Southern California. And I grew up here my whole life. Haven't really lived much further than where I was born. And so I'm out here. I'm married to my wife, Sarah. I've got 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. And right now I'm living, like I said, in Ventura in Oxnard, and I teach high school English.
You teach high school English in Oxnard?
Yes.
What grades do you teach? Just so everyone knows.
Yeah, this year I'm teaching 10th and 11th grade, but I've taught them all.
Okay, cool. So to be on this podcast, would you consider yourself a generalist, or are we bringing you on for more of a specialist for some reason?
If it's for something specialized, I would be worried, because I don't feel like I have any specialized talent. I'm definitely, absolutely a generalist.
I would say if you were a specialist, it's in English at a high school teaching level and surfing. But we'll be getting into that. Why would you say you're a generalist, do you think?
It all starts with interest. I'm interested in a lot of things. I tend to gravitate toward the interest of others. And so if someone is interested in something, I just kind of naturally hop on to that train. So like when I met you, it was like I never really painted before, and then all of a sudden I was starting to paint, and didn't fly fish, and you kept telling me I need to do this, so I hopped on and started fly fishing. I've been like that.
And we have a crazy story about that, of how you got me into another part of fly fishing that I never touched my whole life. But we'll get to that later.
Yeah, so I've just always grabbed onto whatever people were doing around me, and I over time I found things that I really like to do and continue to do. But there's always something.
Did it ever present itself as a struggle in your life?
I think for a long time, I had a hard time really like committing to one thing. And so that really gave me a lot of feelings of like not being able to be good enough at something. In growing up, I played a ton of sports. I did soccer, basketball, baseball, and in all of them, I was always just it felt like I was a guest. I wasn't really an expert. I wasn't really someone who wanted to really commit to being really good at something. And so
and sorry to interject, but you are being kind of humble, because Kyle Ripley does all things well. It's a joke, because he's literally better than you at anything you do together, pretty much immediately, which is funny. So
I feel he's probably
good at all the sports, but he just wasn't great.
And yeah, I feel like I just have to let that stand and move on.
Did you ever have like your dad or anybody in your life telling you like, son, you need to focus on one thing, you can't be doing everything?
Not really. My dad is kind of a generalist as well.
Nice.
He was a firefighter for 40 years, but before that, he drafted pools. He did landscaping. Growing up, I remember he would pour concrete at our house, or he would lay brick, or we would be.
He's a good woodworker too. Woodworker.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Really good woodworker. I learned how to tool leather from him. I learned how to woodwork from him. I learned about electrical and running gas line in our house from him. So he would kind of have all these hidden talents, and they would start to come out. And that might be, in many ways, how I became a generalist in my own experience.
No, that's really cool, because for me too, I relate to that, because I saw my dad tooling leather too. And he didn't have a ton of things, but there was a time where he got his wood shop set up really well, and he made some stuff. He made some stuff out of leather, and he did a few other things. And then the fly fishing, the hunting, the sports, it was just, a lot of hobbies. Sometimes I'll ask people like, do you have any hobbies? And they literally say no. And it kind of blows my mind, because my dad always had a bunch. I have so many, and some of my friends have a lot. So when I ask someone that and they have no hobbies, it's like a dead end in my mind. I don't know where to go with that. Yeah. So any of you listening, if we have that conversation, at least prepare one thing that you make up, or two maybe. But Kyle, do you think you can like harness this journalism for good, or do you think it's something that hinders you from becoming great at one thing? Or do you think it has another benefit that maybe some people wouldn't understand, because most of our society is set up to set you in one vertical trajectory through school, college, graduate school, PhD, like it's all one vertical instead of branching out? Do you see any benefit to it, or do you think or even better, can you harness it for even good that, some people might not even think about? Or do you see it as something that is distracting and does keep people like us, like just good at a bunch of things and not great at anything?
I definitely think there's a benefit, and I really like that question, because I haven't really thought about this before. But with all these, with general skill, there are some like just very basic skills that you have to be able to do all of these things. And so for like, whenever I'm working with leather, or tying flies, or building a model, or doing woodworking, or
growing a mustache,
yeah, the concentration and the focus and the energy that it takes to do that, like focus on small detail, comes through. And so I think in just grabbing onto something new, or a new skill, or a new hobby, I can pick it up a little bit quicker, because I've really been doing these things for a long time. So like when I go fly fish, and you're teaching me how to look at the water and read water and see how things are happening, I've been doing that when I was lifeguarding, watching water, looking for different ripples and changes in places, or even playing water polo, being in the water, surfing, swimming, diving, doing all of these things. They all have a crossover. And so really, really focusing in on what I'm good at in a general range of things.
Yeah, and you taught me to read water on the ocean, which is like a way to read riptide, like to protect your children, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Which is similar. You're actually reading water movement on top of the water, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Anyways, let's jump into the arts. So what kind of hobbies, arts are you into, and what are some of your artistic influences? So first, what are the arts that you're actually into?
Yeah, so I would say that the top two right now are writing, fiction, poetry, and then leather work. So working on leather right now, it's either tooling or building wallets or bags or backpacks or pretty much anything I can figure out how to build out of leather.
So for our listeners, what is tooling?
Yeah, so it's leather tooling is similar. It also could be called leather carving, but you basically take a raw piece of, it's called veg tanned leather, and you cut into it, and the cut line just cuts through the top layer of the leather, and then you take bevels and you press with a hammer, and it's almost like a hammer and chisel, and you
shape it with textures and such.
Yeah, you shape it to get whatever image you're trying to pull out of it.
I had to ask that so people could get the just tooling around joke, which no one's gonna laugh at except you and me. My wife was like, "You are such a dork," when I told her that. We can make a shirt, bro. Yeah. So how about some of your artistic influences with so leather was probably your dad?
Yeah, definitely. Leather was my dad, and I didn't really have, the only other person that I had was Al Stolman, who he used to carve the guitar straps for John Denver.
Oh, nice. I never heard of him.
Yeah. And so he created all these almost like comic books. So it's very similar to the
with leather.
Yeah. So he would create these huge books that were drawn images to show you how to carve leather. And so I grabbed onto those things and just started teaching myself how to do it. It was very similar to the Curtis Creek fly
manifesto.
Fishing. Yeah.
Yeah. So you say you do most of your learning through comic book style?
Yep.
You learn leather and fly fishing from that? Yeah. So let's get back to poetry and writing. So who's some main influences on that?
Yeah, definitely for poetry, it's Wendell Berry. I mean, his style and the content all kind of come together to just really speak to me and who I am and the things that I'm passionate about. And he puts them in a way that is, it jumps off the page for me. So he's definitely one of my biggest inspirations, at least right now, when it comes to poetry and writing.
And you love Me Without You as well, right?
Yeah. It's funny because when I was thinking about that, I knew it would come up because it always does when I'm in a conversation. I love.
Well, it's on most of your shirts and sweatshirts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny
which if you're hearing this on audio, he's wearing a Me Without You sweatshirt right now.
Yeah.
Just pretty much has subconscious intentional all the time.
Yeah. The funny thing about Me Without You is Aaron Weiss, the lead singer, his lyrics are amazing, but I would be fooling myself if I said that I knew anything of what he was talking about. Sometimes you grab onto some snippets here and there, but it's more just how he crafts words to flow and become lyrical is really why he's such a huge inspiration to me. And then the band itself is just the style of music is
it's pretty much your favorite band, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You're not afraid to say it.
No, I'll take that.
Like for me, it's Listener. For you, it's Me Without You, and we are two peas in a pod with that because they both love each other too.
Yeah,
and I love you, Kyle. So we'll keep this bromance going. But anyway, so what? Let's talk about Wendell Berry. So, well, actually, before we go to Wendell Berry, there's a time where you and Jeremy and I were in my garage a couple times, and maybe I don't know if we did it anywhere else, but we got together to paint, listen to music, and we happened to smoke pipes and drink beer while we were doing it. And then you got Me Without You on vinyl, and Jeremy brought the record player, and that kind of made a magical evening. We probably started at like 8 when the kids are down, and then went till midnight. And it was just amazing. Like that for me, that I mean, it could be just joked off like, bro, we just got together or whatever. But for me, it was just having like that music, that art, and then we're both in church together. We were having those theological conversations, struggles, things like that. I mean, there's really nothing better than having those few categories together. And then we happen to be the ones that we were talking about. We're fly fishing together too. So, and you guys surf. I surf, but I don't really surf. So I'm just a kook who surfed one.
We're all kooks in our own way.
Well, no, I went surfing 7 times, but I actually surfed once. So that was my claim to fame.
There you go.
But yeah, it's really, really crazy. I mean, guys are not known to get together and paint together. So and we did have all of our clothes on. It was pretty tame. We're pretty tame. We're painting random stuff. But anyway, so that was a special time for me to have these things in common. And that basically stuck with me. And it's kind of the inspiration of this whole podcast idea, was that generalism that can bring people together where they have a bunch of random things in common can become very, very powerful. Like, you just have so much to talk about, and it's just a really fun time when you get people like that. So yeah. On to Wendell Berry again. I know that you loved him. I brought it up as, writing and poetry. Why do you think he's had such an impact on you and such an influence in your life? You have basically a collection on your shelves of, it's like you're trying to complete your whole Ken Griffey Jr. set of years and types of baseball cards. You're trying to collect everything Wendell Berry. What is it about him? I mean, there's a million authors out there.
Yeah, I mean, being an English teacher, I have read a lot, and I've read a lot of authors, and it was, for him, he really brought together, kind of like you were talking about in that evening when we're getting together to paint. It was like he brought together theology, ecology, economy, and community in a way that I had never really heard from any other person before. I mean, he was marrying things
that
incredible. I had no idea were so connected, but they were connected in my life. So like when we talk about the outdoors and art, he has something to say about that. And it's profound. It's not just something to say. It's like he has an almost like an authority on those things.
Yeah, he speaks with such an authority of like a mic drop. Like, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
This is reality, folks. And he doesn't piss off people who are, environmentalists or anything. He's actually a thought leader in that, which is incredible. And he's coming from a Christian worldview in his mind, of caring for the earth in a way of stewardship and doing what is good to the earth and to others and to our children and our neighbors. He has a big, huge emphasis on neighbors. And that's been, my next question is like, what are some themes or concepts that he's contributed to you? For me, like, responsibility to neighbors is kind of something we have lost in America, I think, culturally. Like, if your neighbor disagrees with you politically, like, F them, you do not care. Like, but yet he has a concern for neighbors, that they would live in a community that is sustainable and like loves one another, or at least beneficially lives together, rather than tear each other down or tear down the mountains around them for coal. Things he cares deeply about.
He calls it the membership. It was like, if you live in a community together, you're a part of a membership, whether you like it or not. You're just in it together. And so much of the world right now wants to divide and conquer. And I mean, his poetry and his essays really focus in on this idea of being a member in your community and in your home place. And so I mean,
well, you just said the poetry and the essays. I'm getting it the most from the 2 novels I've read, which are the fiction, Jayber Crow, and Hannah Coulter.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
That that name, I mean, that membership word is like the theme basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and his fiction is such a it's a really amazing expression, because here he's created this space, which is Fort William, which is a fictional town that has no, it's not real, and he's populated that town, and every piece of his fiction takes place there with the characters of that town, and part of their membership. And so his fiction really does play out his ideas and the things that he sees in the world, through that fictional storytelling. And it's very impactful.
And you are the one who told me that all his fiction is based in one town, off of family trees he created, off of a 200-year history that's basically all correlated between like 20 different fiction books. So just want everyone to hear about that, because it's pretty interesting. If you want to get into it, you can start with any one of them. They're all just kind of telling the story out of order. It's really, really incredible idea. They're all different titles on different characters, and a few are named about the places. So it's something I know Kyle and I would love to share with the world. Anyone that hasn't heard.
Yeah.
Trying to get my dad to read Jaber Crow and see if he gets hooked. He doesn't really like fiction, which is Kyle, why do you connect with fiction?
Oh man, I think fiction packs more reality into its own space than nonfiction, because nonfiction is limited by actual events, where fiction you can jam in anything and everything into 2 pages.
Yeah, thematically, morally, everything.
Yeah.
You could question everything with a few pages.
Yeah.
And we're familiar with that that defensive fiction that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote, right? The fairy tales, or what does he call it? In Defense of Fairy Stories or something?
Yeah, it's I
don't know how he called it.
It's something about fairy.
He calls it Fairy Stories in that title.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Just to check my fairy stories. Oh, it's called On Fairy Stories.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's like, it's an expression of like why fiction matters, which is, just for what it's worth, just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Because I actually was like my dad. I did not care about fiction at all. I wanted everything nonfiction. Tell me how to live. Tell me how to believe. Tell me what to do. And nonfiction was literally all of my interest until maybe 5 to 10 years ago. And I was hearing about very impactful authors, like Flannery O'Connor. I guess she was like completely tearing it up, morally and socially challenging status quo in her day as a Catholic woman, which was very ahead of her time to be that radically confrontational of the culture as a woman, and then speaking it from a Catholic perspective, challenging like all the racism and everything in our culture at that time. So it's pretty cool to hear what fiction can do. I was like, dang, I never thought of that. So that's about it for Wendell Berry there, unless we have we'll have a callback probably. So as far as poetry, what got you into poetry? How long have you been into it, and how much have you written?
I think I've been into poetry my whole reading life. I think that was something I remember reading poetry and writing poetry when I was a kid in elementary school, and just really enjoying it. And even though I teach English, I don't like to read for long periods of time. And so a poem was a really good way to sit down, read something, and be able to finish it in a moment. It's like this sounds terrible to say, it's like the Instagram of the writing world, where you can you can look at something really fast and get a bunch of feelings from it, or it can impact you in a major way, just like a photo, and then you can move on. Or you can sit with it for a long time. So was kind of my intro, was getting into it as a kid. And then now I've probably got like 50 or 60 poems that I'm really happy with, and trying to workshop and get into some kind of a published realm.
Building up a body of work.
Yeah.
For me, I think poetry is kind of like a handle, like gives you something to grab onto, and it's a quick fix, like a faster drug than something that takes you like half a year to read. And that was good for someone like me, obviously, too, the lack of long focus and the ability to get something out of something very quickly. And I think poetry exists because of that. It has a quick, powerful effect. If people can appreciate it, and some people don't. And that's another thing, like fiction. It's like some people, probably the same minds, don't really appreciate fiction that don't appreciate poetry. I'm not sure if that's true. That's just a guess. But I don't know. There's something about it for me that has always been very profound. It can cause you to feel or think something very quickly, and it can impact the way you think, impact the way you feel, impact the way you perceive something. And I just think it's so awesome for that. And, I've read some of your poetry, you've read some of my poetry, and I find it very, very powerful way to connect with others and like hear what's going on in their heart and mind. And then you read really good poets, like who have books out and ones that you resonate with, and it's just like amazing. You just get to know them kind of and hear about their thoughts. It's kind of just thoughts thrown out on paper in a very artistic way. Yeah. So after a lot of work and stress, like if you had a stressful week at work, kids on their phones and shooting spitballs at you or something. I don't know what they're doing these days. What are kids doing these days?
Oh man.
Not showing up.
Not the assignments I give them, that's for sure.
Yeah. So if you had a stressful work week, what are the types of activities that recharge you? Because that's kind of one of the themes of this podcast.
Yeah. For me, it's if I'm gonna do something, active, it's usually surfing. If there's waves or an opportunity to go surf, I'm on it. I'll do everything I can, sometimes to the detriment of my responsibilities, but that's where I get recharged. And then on top of that, it's really just hanging out with people. I'm an extrovert to the point where it's like when I'm with people, I'm getting recharged. And my wife always jokes, because she's like, we could go hang out with somebody. We go hang out at a friend's house for hours and come home, and I'll see neighbors out in their garage having a barbecue or drinking, watching some sports game or whatever. And I'll go hang out with them till late in the night because I'm so amped up on just being around people. So those are definitely my recharge.
Fellow extrovert.
Yeah.
Introverts are like, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
What activities do you love to do with friends?
I mean, anything that has to do with sharing passions. I think I love to do what other people love to do. And I think that's why, like, our friendship has been something that's been so life-giving, is like, you love to paint and you love to show people how to paint. And so I jumped in and you were showing me how to do this stuff. And then I was getting to show you how to tool leather or
and Wendell Berry. So I gave you a couple things, you gave me a couple things. It's pretty cool. It's like kind of a Cross-pollination that happens in this generalism. It's easy. Basically, if you're that good at learning a bunch of different things, you're probably, I don't know if this is true, but like, you might be a teacher type person. You're good at showing others how to do it. So it's easy to spread that, and enjoy things together. It's always fun to do things with friends.
Yeah.
What when it comes to surfing, like how do you get past like the cliche, like, I'm California, I surf, I was a lifeguard, you're basically like Hasselhoff over here. What does it really mean to you, like on a little deeper level, like, even physically maybe, or or
Yeah.
physiologically, or
It's for me, surfing is it's the most challenging thing in my life. Um, and I say that kind of like, it's kind of funny because it's like it's something that I have to always be checking myself on. Um, it's the thing that will distract me from, like I said, responsibility. It's the thing that will give me life when I get to do it. It's the thing that'll make me really angry if I don't do it well. And so like there are days when like I'm just not having it, and my wife will look at me and be like, "You need to go surf." Like, and I'm like, "But there's no waves." And she's like, "I don't care. You need to go get a board and just get out there because you're not a
dude,
to be around."
dude, no matter how I look at it, it's always head high at Mondo's
Yeah.
every day.
Yes.
And
uh,
to your credit, I knew a bunch of like Christian dudes who said they follow Jesus. And when you follow Jesus, you're supposed to lay your life down for others. And you're supposed to serve others. Like these are things he calls us into. Like, no, not one person. I mean, I was from Arizona, like North Shore of Arizona, and no one would take me surfing ever, like for years. And they'd all say, "Oh yeah, I'll take you." And they're like literally under their breath, they're like, "I'm lying." In their, in their mind, they're telling themselves like, "I'll never take him surfing," because that's how it played out. But there's one true Christian named Kyle Ripley who took me surfing a couple times. And the first time he tried to kill me at Oxnard Shores, it was like 7 or 8 foot waves, it looked like to me. But
I
then he took me to a couple like chill, learn how to surf spots. And finally at Mondo's, I did stand up on the board and ride it for a while. So that was the first time I actually surfed, and after about 7 outings over the years.
yeah.
And
Well,
I don't know, I found it to be way difficult because I mean, I had skateboarded, I'm really, my strongest is probably wakeboarding and snowboarding, but surfing is a different animal altogether. It's completely way more difficult and scary. So that's just me being honest.
yeah. And
It's a beast.
I'll take your compliment, but also I have this terrible track record of almost killing my friends that want to surf. I think
Yeah.
there's probably 3 or 4 people that have near drowning experiences because I wanted to surf and take someone surfing.
Yeah, and then we go to Mondo's where it's like little waves and longboards, and the guys looks at Kyle, who's being a nice friend, and these old guys look at Kyle and they say, "That board's a little short, isn't it?" And then one more thing Kyle taught me about science on that surf morning. He said there's this thing you can do in the morning where if you drink two full glasses of water, like right when you wake up, you drink it all. He like spelled this out for me. You drink all that water. I'm like, yeah. He's like, they say it's like supposed to hydrate you. So Kyle, do you
Hey,
have an explanation for that moment? Because I still don't know what you're saying.
am I wrong though?
It
That's a proven fact.
definitely hydrates you. Yes, you're totally correct.
It just took me a while to like really internalize that.
You had to verbalize it.
Yeah.
Water's
Like, whoa,
supposed to hydrate you.
like wait. If it's not just coffee that you drink in the morning, you feel a lot better.
And then I taught you something about where fish live.
Oh yeah. Oh
Which
yeah.
had a similar
That's paid
axiom.
off. That's paid off.
Yeah.
Fish
Well,
live in water.
yeah. We'll get to that. We're almost there. But anyways, so surfing. Did you hit what you need to hit on surfing, or it's almost like a physiological need for you, it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean it kind of pulls all the things together for me. It's a physical exercise. It keeps me in shape. It's a beautiful environment. Like I'm happy to go sit and watch waves for a while, and then it's challenging. It's always pushing me to be better, and the people that I surf with are pushing me to be better. And so it's like I think of like I had friends that like played basketball and football and all these sports, and they love watching basketball and football and all these things, and I just couldn't really get into it, even though I played all those sports too. But surfing's the one where it's like I can watch it, I can do it, it's just I love it so much.
Even though you were like 8 for 10 on the 3-point line, you're like, I'm not into it.
Yeah. If I'm not
He
putting
just
the
does
ball
all
in,
things
what's
well.
the point?
So then onto fly fishing. Like this is a cool story for me because it's something I shared with you. But then what amazed me was it became a stoke enough for you to like pass by it, literally physically drive up the PCH and pass waves to go fishing a few times into above Ojai. And that meant a lot to me because I'm like, dude, this guy, somehow we got a surfer into fly fishing. This is crazy. And I mean, our other buddy was a surfer who fly fished already, but to get you, who was like your main thing was surfing, to really get into fly fishing was kind of crazy because you literally have to pass by the waves. I mean, there's a day at least that we come back from fly fishing, you're begging your wife if you can go surfing now because the waves were pumping.
We left when it was dark, and on the way back there was sunlight, and I was like, uh-oh.
Oh yeah, firing. That's what you're saying. Dude, the waves are firing. So yeah, how did that stoke like kind of hook you?
I mean, it's one of those things where like, well, this also was probably very helpful, and I think you can attest to this. My first cast on my first time landed a fish, and it was like, what? Okay, that's amazing. Let's keep doing this. This is easy.
Not just landed a fish, it hit the fly on top of the water, which is like the best. So
Yeah.
when you see that and you feel that, it's just like adrenaline. And you got that on your first cast, which Jeremy and I were just like, what? How does that happen? Only for Kyle Ripley can that happen.
I think just like surfing, it was being outside. It was a totally new environment. It was something that I'd never really experienced before. And I think fishing, I've always liked fishing. Fishing has always been fun. I'd go with my dad, I'd go with friends. But this had more of an element of like hunting to it. Like you were actively looking for water and for fish and for the things that would be a sign that you should cast here. And then the challenge of casting and the art of tying flies was like drew me in.
Slow down on that one, because I want to ask about that.
Yeah. But I mean, that was the
Untying.
draw. It was like Jeremy, our friend, when he got there, he gave me a fly that he had tied, and so it was like, I was like, whoa, this is part of this. Like, this is amazing. And so it was
kind of drew out your craftsmanship again.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that type of focus that you have.
Yeah.
And that ability to learn, that's the part that blew me away. And it kind of coincided with, I had read that book Mindset, which is about having a growth mindset versus a closed mindset. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people say, oh no, I don't fly fish. Or like previously, I don't tie flies. Or whatever, I don't surf. I don't whatever, fill in the blank. The growth mindset says, how can I? Or I can learn to, instead of I don't.
I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, so you just jumped in. I mean, you totally violated my tenure as a fly fisherman. And you learn how to tie flies in your first year as a fly fisherman. I've been fly fishing since I was 8, and I never tied a fly because for some reason, I never thought to even look up how it's even done. It just seemed like magic to me. I didn't think it could actually be done. I thought it was some kind of magic robots that tied tiny little things like that, all intricate. But it turns out it's not that hard. Kyle showed me in his garage with a couple of beers, and it was amazing. And now I can tie them. And now I'm showing my little 5-year-old and 7-year-old how to tie them, and they're getting it. It's pretty cool. So anyways, thank you for that, Kyle. I love that, like, I can learn it mentality, and that's pretty much how we ended up here. It's believing you can learn things and then being a quick learner at things. I mean, one friend told me YouTube, anything, you can learn anything on YouTube, and I was like, huh, that's how he started his pressure washing business. And I was like, oh, you can learn anything on YouTube? That's crazy. So basically that's the truth.
Yeah.
Now on to you're the sole breadwinner. This is onto like finances and then into family. You're the sole breadwinner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has providing for your family ever been a struggle?
I mean, the teachers get
I
paid
mean,
so
not really
well
as a teacher.
that yeah, no, it's providing for family has always been something that was it has always been tough. And my wife and I kind of decided that when we had kids, this was both of us made this decision that she would stay home. She really wanted to stay home and be with the kids. And so
She's also homeschooling too, right?
yeah, so we started homeschooling, and she really runs that whole thing. So when you say sole provider, like I I make the money, but like
Yeah,
my wife,
financially.
yeah, but my wife provides education. She cooks, she cleans, she does so much around the house. And it really is a team effort. And so I definitely like there's those times where it creeps in where I'm like, I uh I made this money. I should be able to do these things. Like I'm going to work every day, and what are you doing? And but we've had to really think about like that this is not like a me you kind of a thing. Like we're making this work together. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so being a sole provider, it while the finances of it can sometimes be difficult, the pressure of being a sole provider has never really been something that was like uh, too much to bear. Um, she's always said like if you want to quit and have me go to work, like we could figure that out. But I kind of like my job, so
Yeah.
that also makes it a little easier.
I remember driving in Camarillo with one of my buddies, Jess, one morning, and we were just got coffee. We're going to work together. Uh, he was picking me up at the time. I had one car at the time, and I was in a bad place financially and job wise. And I remember him and I talking. I was like, man, the weight of being a husband, holding a marriage together through stress, the weight of being there for your children when you're stressed is difficult, and the weight of that financial provision is incredible. The weight was incredible for both of us. We were just like, this is so different than X amount of years ago. You all of a sudden have this weight of responsibility for these three more categories, like providing for others, a marriage, and children. And it's incredible. It's an incredible weight. And one thing I want to talk about on this podcast regularly will be, what do you do with that weight? Because the divorce rates among even our friends and even in the church, friends in the church, is astounding. I mean, it's a huge reality in our lives, watching friends' marriages, unravel, or all of a sudden finding out it's over, or finding out infidelity is happening. I think if we don't ask the question of like, how do you handle that weight, and what are you doing to recharge? What are you doing to take care of yourself as a man and a husband and a father? It's complex. That weight is complex, and it can break you, and you can snap. I think that's what happens. Guys snap, and women snap too. I'm not saying it's just a guy thing. People snap under too much pressure and too much failure and too much discouragement. So, I wanted to ask you about that as we go into family. Like, how do you think you cope with that weight? And how does it relate to trying to do these things that you love? Or are doing those things you love, part of the remedy?
Yeah, I think when you put it in those terms of like the weight of it, the financial stuff, like I came from a background where everything was pretty much provided for me. I didn't want for anything as a kid. And so in my adult life and being a teacher, the financial aspect of life has kind of just been, you just kind of roll, like I just roll with the punches, but I still have everything that I need. But then when you start thinking about all the things that you're talking about, when you mention all the responsibility, the extra thought that is outside of yourself, where for so long you you live your own life and you're kind of making judgment calls for yourself, and then all of a sudden you bring in this other person, and then kids get thrown into the mix, and then you're having to make all these decisions and do things that had once been just you making decisions is now a joint decision, or having to work with somebody, thinking about how your decisions are going to affect others. It definitely does put a lot on, I think, on people, and it's interesting because I think that the way that the man is kind of, I guess, put out in our context, like both of us growing up in churches, there's a way that a man is supposed to perform. There's a way that you are supposed to be, and there's almost this tough macho persona, but then there's also this this Christ-like forgiveness and love, and sometimes those two can clash. And as I'm thinking about this, it's that where those two things are like at war with one another, like especially with like me, where like here we're talking about like poetry and art and all these things that, and even you mentioned like men aren't really supposed to get together and listen to music and paint. Even my dad thought that was a little weird when we did it. But
especially our dad's generation.
Yeah, but it was like there was definitely this this feeling of like feeling like you want to be able to express all these things, but then this pressure and that weight that you have to perform a certain way. And I think for me, it really has drawn out into becoming something that I just have to allow myself to grow and be who God made me, and not really worry about what I'm told that I'm supposed to be. And I don't know if that kind of goes off topic as far as like the weight, but I think a lot of it comes back to like my identity. Like a lot of this is an identity crisis when I meet that weight, when I think, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I performing the way that I'm expected to perform?
Yeah. Well, I think as I mean, this is a little hornet's nest of issues, but I do think a lot of fathers who don't step up to that weight, they can tend to fail their families or start to fail their families with anger and bitterness because they're not managing their own needs, and they're not recognizing their wife's needs. And women who are, if any women out there are stay-at-home moms, they have a full-time job, and it's something that if they weren't doing it, you'd have to pay somebody $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000 to get all that stuff done. Like if your wife did have a full-time job, to replace all of that work. And it's important. I see it in you, Kyle, and I love and respect you. I see you loving your wife, honoring her, and recognizing her work as work, and hard and valid and very, very humble and supportive and serving. And then I see her loving and honoring you the same way back. And I know that kind of respect, and my wife and I too. And in our worst moments, we're not doing that. We're biting at each other about these sorts of things. And yet we do have a deep rooted understanding of this the right way. And when we wander from that is when we're fighting. And I know fathers who are not recognizing that weight. They're not recognizing their wife's weight of what, well, that's funny. They're not recognizing the weight of what their wife is carrying. And maybe they're recognizing the wrong weight, and they should be recognizing what she does for the family. And ultimately, they end up not becoming men or fathers in the sense of like owning it and stepping up to it and recognizing what the other person is going through. And I think that's something I really want to highlight with any of the fathers here that I love and respect, to highlight how they do that. Because there's an immaturity when you won't take responsibility for all of that. And at the same time, to speak kind of where you were going with the weight, we don't have to carry that weight by ourselves. Like in faith, God is actually saying, I don't want you to perform all of that perfectly on your own strength. You're going to need my strength is basically where God's perspective is on that. It's like, you cannot perform you cannot be even a great father. You might be able to be a great father without God in a sense, but God's intention is that he would carry that weight with you and for you, and that he would actually accomplish it for you in faith, and then you'd be able to walk freely in it. So all that pressure wouldn't be so much on us, particularly by ourselves. It'd be more of a prayer thing with God and wife. So it's all kind of a trust instead of a freaking out that I don't know if I can carry this.
Yeah.
Does that strike anything for you? Like, I don't think we're meant to carry that weight literally all by ourselves, like isolated deadlifters.
Yeah. And I mean, just as you're talking, it's funny because it's like I can think about like all the things that I'm doing right. But I think one of the most impactful moments for me as a father and a husband was like my lowest point as a father, was when my third child was born. So when my son Barrett was born, he was born with his fingers on, it's like his pinky, ring finger, and middle finger were fused on both hands. And my wife and I, we decided that we're not going to have our kids in the hospital. We didn't do a lot of ultrasounds. We had a midwife. We did this whole thing at home. And so here it's 2 a.m. I mean, my wife's been in labor for hours and hours and hours. It's actually been a week of like, she thought she's going to have the baby, didn't. So it's been rough. I'm absolutely exhausted. I can't imagine how exhausted she is. And here my son is born, and with all my other kids, it was like, you take them, you hold them, you love them, you kiss them. It's like, you're so excited for this child that's been born. And for me, for probably the first like 5 or 6 hours, I was like, almost disgusted. Like I couldn't handle it. Like his hands were deformed. He has a couple of toes that are fused, but it wasn't anything crazy. But it was just like this flood of like fear and disappointment and anger and a mix of emotion that I was not expecting. And I just remember falling asleep that day and just consumed with this, like, with every emotion that you would not think you would have when your child is born. Like, it should be this really happy moment. And I remember I fell asleep, and it wasn't even a dream. It wasn't anything. It was just like, I felt like God was telling me, like, hey, just remember, like, his strength doesn't come from his hands. His strength is going to come from me. And I remember waking up the next morning and holding him and just like feeling like I had to just apologize, because like I completely failed. I missed that moment of being able to like grab him and bring him into the world and be proud of even his, just who he is, apart from this very minor deformity. And yet it brought out in me something that I had to really, really wrestle and struggle with, is like that part of it is that it's completely out of my control. Like my kids, my marriage, all of these things are totally out of my control. And there's nothing I can do. Well, maybe not completely out of control, but it's more like the way that these things happen is not like, I don't have a say in it, is more how this goes. And so I had to really learn to like leave expectations at the door and be flexible and listen and hear from God, listen to my wife, listen to my kids. And I think through parenting and marriage, like that lesson, or just the lesson of realizing that, like, in many ways, like I have the capacity to be awful. Like I have the capacity to cheat on my wife, and I have the capacity to be a totally non-existent father. Like I could just go surf all the time. Like I could go do whatever I want. I could drink myself silly every night. And realizing that potential is there, has kind of been something that has really made me think like, oh, these are things that I can't allow in my life. And so through just kind of through that experience, and then just through looking back on life, it's I feel like everything that I've learned, and everything that's been handed to me in parenting and marriage has kind of like, I've had to take it off of my, like I can't credit myself. Like it's come from so many different places and so many different people.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
When it comes to parenting, before Barrett, you had 2 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me of what it's like to be a father of daughters? Because I don't know at all, because I got 3 boys.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely nervous because I have 2 brothers. I never had a sister. Having daughters was something that I did not expect, and I would have been totally fine after having 2. I would have been totally fine having 3. Everyone always says, like, everybody always says like, oh, you got your son, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's cool, but I would have been totally fine with 3 girls. And so the biggest thing for me was there is an emotional component to this that I was not really ready for. Like my daughters will, like, they'll run into a problem and it is all consuming and it has to be dealt with, and we have to sit down and we have to talk, and I have to give them hugs and lots of kisses and reminders that it's okay and all these things. And with my son, it's like he'll just hit me and everything's okay. Like it just there's a complete difference between the two. And my boy's only 2, so I haven't really experienced raising a son, but there is definitely a difference. There's just I feel like there's a slower pace with girls, but a lot more emotionally charged. Faster pace, less emotions for the boy.
Cool. What do you think is the most important attribute that you want to have as a father? Like, what is being the good father you want to be? What attribute comes to mind that you really wish you could harness, grow in, or embody?
Yeah, it sounds funny because it's like, when I think about who my dad was for me, is like, my dad was a teacher, an example. My parents are still together, and that's apparently that's an amazing thing. Like I hear all these stories about parents that aren't together, and even that story has a whole background for me that I don't really want to get into, but it's something that, like, in my dad, like my dad has been with my mom and nobody else in his marriage, and so, like, having that solid foundation of just like a good relationship, to me as a father, is one of the best things I can give my kids. Is like,
you mean good relationship with your kids?
No, a good relationship with my wife as the example to my kids.
Oh,
like,
that's really good.
Me being a husband and the best husband that I can be makes me a good father.
Hmm.
And so the everything else that comes along with that is kind of secondary, because when my kids see how I treat my wife, they're going to see how they treat other people, or how other people should be treated. And so the lessons that I give to my kids are the lessons on how I live, not necessarily what I teach them, but what they see me doing in my life.
That's very convicting. I'm serious, because I mean, that's something Jill brings up, is like the kids are talking rude to each other because they see us talking rude to each other. And that makes me really sad, but it also is very impactful what you're saying, because that tells me like that's what I got to focus on more than I'm probably parenting fine, but I need to honor and love my wife better, and we need to do that for each other better so that we can, hand them that legacy that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That gift of parents that really love each other.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end here, what two questions kind of intertwined, and then we'll finish on a couple faith aspects. Do you ever feel selfish going surfing, or let's just say surfing, that's your main thing?
Yeah.
And then what do you have any way, like hope for the future, where you could like integrate the things you love in while working and raising a family, or do you ever have any sort of dream how you could actually do the things you love for work? Those are kind of questions together. And I got to interject that your whole family is at the beach a lot of the time when you surf. I mean, you do have your own surfing sessions, but you also like surf right in front of them. You're all together having a beach day, like every weekend, every day on the weekend. Like you guys literally are the most beachy people I've ever met.
Unless it's been raining for 2 weeks here in California, so it's not even, can't even do that.
But yeah, do you ever feel selfish, and do you ever see a way to integrate it more or less than, more than what you could do normally now?
Yeah, the only time I feel selfish for it is when I know I am
pushing it and not communicating.
Yeah, or not doing
neglecting
the thing I'm supposed to be doing at the time. Like yesterday, my daughter had a basketball game, and I was like, but I could go surf. But I knew if I went surfing instead of going to a basketball game, like it wouldn't even be enjoyable. I'd feel awful about missing that to go surf. So when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or if I know my wife is struggling at home, and I'm like, I'm gonna go, the waves are really good, I'm just gonna go, then I don't feel good about it. So it can happen. Like I can feel selfish, but most of the time it feels pretty good to get out in the water. And then just with the idea of being able to get to kind of leverage all these things that I enjoy into something that I do for work. It is really nice teaching at a high school, because you're getting to bring your passions out and show your students the things that you love. So like I always make it a point to bring in Wendell Berry, and to bring stuff to my classes, so that my kids get to experience some of the things that I experience. We write a lot. I mean, I do a lot of writing in class with my students, so they get to see what I'm writing and can hear about the things that I'm doing, as well as them. And so I kind of get to marry all these things together. One of the things we didn't really get into was water polo. When I was a kid, I played all these sports. I loved sports. Like I was doing everything. And I developed like pretty severe tendonitis in my legs when I was like 10 years old. And the doctor pretty much told me, he's like, you can't run. Like running, your legs are gonna give out. And so I started swimming. And so now the job that I've had the longest is coaching water polo. And so that's been something that has always been really life-giving to me. And on hard days at work when I'm teaching, I know I get to wrap up my day with usually a water polo practice or something out on a pool then. So.
And you take the kids surfing as an excuse to practice water polo swimming?
Only twice.
So our last topic on the subjects would be the faith aspect. So, I don't want to spend a lot of time on the past where you had, I know you've grown up in a Christian and evangelical world most of your life, youth groups and all that, and as I did. And we connected 2014-ish maybe, at a church plant in Ventura. And what's kind of been your last few years? I mean, you and I have done this together, but we came across, I kind of just want you to speak to it, and then just what that has been to you, what that has meant to you. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I discovered a book called Slow Down, written by these guys who are called the Table Network. There's a guy named Russ and Tony, and more recently their organization was changed to the name Lark, and the website is Larkcast, Lark LARK, which means like a whimsical, joyful thing. So we read it. I read it. I was like, you got to read this, Kyle. And we ended up both resonating with us a lot. We ended up going through this study called Reclaim. Ripley's went through it 4 times in our backyard as they were still attending, a church, a regular church. And then we were kind of trying to think, could this be our own community, a small community in our backyard and stuff? And so I just wanted you, Kyle, to describe like what that story was for you from about there on, from about going through Reclaim a few times, what started to occur to you, and what did change for you, because then you ended up approaching, church differently after that, and just how to view it and how to be a part of it.
Yeah. Okay. I could spend hours talking about.
I know that could be a whole nother hour,
but I'm gonna make this really fast, and that's
kind of like the Wendell-Berry thing. What is the
yeah.
nucleus?
Yeah. So you handed me that book. It was so I love that story. Just like some dark night at a train station, you handed me a book through the window of my car, and it sent us on this journey. And really, at the time, we were both involved in churches, and through just kind of our conversations, our going through Reclaim, I think something I'm realizing is that the church, when we talk about the body of Christ, this thing that the people of God that Christ died for, is so much bigger than a Sunday morning gathering. And so for me, from that point, when you gave me that book to now, has been really exploring, what does it mean to be a part of God's church in the place that I'm at right now. And so this has kind of rocked my world. I mean, when I say rocked my world, like that doesn't even sound like it has, it sounds comical. Like it has flipped me upside down. I mean, growing up for 30 plus years in churches, going to churches, attending churches, working at churches, having titles at churches, and then realizing, oh, I was never actually going to a church. I was just part of the church. That was a huge realization for me. And then on top of that, in all of that time, I had never really felt like I was being handed good news. It was almost there. I was being told, here is this thing that Jesus did for you. Here's this finished work on the cross, like Jesus saving you.
And now here's your checklist of how to live into that.
Yes. And then it always came with a but or now. Um, and so I'm living life as if what Jesus did on the cross is real and true. And like,
And absolutely mattered.
and it absolutely mattered. And it was like, I think for so long, I was living in this feeling of needing to become something that I was never told to become. Realizing that I could just live in the loved state that I'm already in, and then almost you just kind of get to sit back and watch God work. I mean, after it, when people ask us like what we're doing and where we're going, we usually just respond with nothing, and then they get really worried, and we're like, okay, now you need to come over to our house for dinner and we can explain this to you.
Yeah, we're gonna get the church together to talk about it, or not just the church, just people, and
Yeah.
learn about the love of God and the grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And something that's been really enjoyable for you and I was to realize like we are the church. So when we hang out with people, instead of getting them to a Sunday service, we're actually being the church in their lives. And that right there is just pretty much a very huge transformation for both of us of what we used to think, we need to get people to church, to we are the church. Let us love people and serve people well. And hopefully we can be something of Christ in their lives. So it's been incredible. And then I know for you and I both, it was just incredibly, I just said incredibly a lot. It was, I'll change words, extremely powerful to realize that the good news wasn't transactional. It wasn't a matter of if you do this, then it's good news, which is really the breakdown for me. It never felt quite good because it was so much bad news up front, then a big if, then there's good news. But the fact is, what you and I learned, people can follow Larkcast, the Lark podcast, or the website, or read Reclaim to find out that. But that was incredibly transformative for us. Mm-hmm. Completely changed and unlearned the gospel, which is central. It made it really, really, really good news.
Yeah.
In such a way that now if I'm explaining it to someone, it's very much more intriguing to them than what I used to say, which was, so you need to be good. And I don't know what I used to say. But anyways, so I have one last question and then we'll wrap it up or run out of time here.
Yeah.
Do you have any personal habits, spiritual habits, or I'd say, spiritual, like those deepest rooted practices for you to kind of stay focused on the best things in your life, the highest things, God and family? And is there something a practice that kind of focuses you, that's daily or weekly or anything like that?
Yeah, it's funny because it wasn't like this for a long time, but I read my Bible almost every day. Not through a necessity. I don't feel like it's necessary for me to do it every day, but it's just something I find myself doing often. That was always something that was prescribed to me and told I had to do. I grew for elementary school. I went to a private Christian school, and that was like an assignment, was to read your Bible every day, and I hated it, and it drove me crazy. But now it's almost like, now that I get to choose to do it and that it's not a requirement, I love doing it. Just like all the other books that I assign my students that they never read, right? But then they get out of high school and like 10 years go by and they're like, I think I might actually want to read Of Mice and Men. It might be kind of good. And they find out they love it. But I think that is one. It's like really reading my Bible and then having conversations like this. Like for me, it's when I get to sit down and talk to someone about something that's theologically I don't know, centered or central in the conversation, it's like I feel like I can just chew and listen and learn and speak and do whatever, do all kinds of things to get to like really drill down into a topic or an idea. And so, yeah, I would say reading my Bible and having those conversations.
That's cool. For me, it's been journaling with my Bible out, but not really reading a whole lot, just kind of glancing and journaling. It's been my thing for going on about 7-8 years now, which is cool. Cool to see my journals stacking up. 2022, I filled my whole journal. Some years I don't. So that was cool. It's one of those moleskins the size of 8 by whatever 6. But anyways, thank you so much, Kyle, for being on the show. Thanks for being the first guest. You're the cornerstone of this podcast. And I really appreciate your insight, really appreciate your heart, and love watching you do all these great things well. So thank you for being here and thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Travis. The generalists have to stick together somehow, or else you get lost doing too many things on your own.
Yeah, we're gonna find you guys out there. I only have like 5 people to interview right now.
Yeah.
We're gonna find the others. They're gonna come out of the woodwork. All right. Thanks so much, Kyle.
All right, man. Bye.
Peace.